Why can some people be so motivated to go about hard tasks? Or how do they stay so consistent in completing difficult activities? The secret lies in dopamine detox, or others call it dopamine fasting. Now, do you have any difficulty on focusing on your classes or meetings? How about when you are playing games or scrolling through your Instagram feed? I have no doubt that you don't have a problem with the latter. In fact, I think you can game or scroll through your TikTok page for 2 hours or even longer without breaking your concentration. But what about half an hour of studying? That might be too hard. How about work on your side business for another hour? It might not sound too engaging or desirable, even though you logically know that studying, exercising, or working on your side hustle would equally be beneficial to you in the long run. Yet you still prefer watching TikTok videos, playing video games, and just scrolling through your social media for hours. One might argue that one activity takes much less effort than the other, but to some people, they find no problem with studying, exercising, or working on their side projects regularly, which begs the question, why can some people be so motivated to go about hard tasks? Or how do they stay so consistent in completing difficult activities? To answer these questions, we need to take a closer look at how the brain neurotransmitter dopamine, which is also known as the pleasure molecule or the happy hormone. It makes us desire things, and it's the desire that gives us the motivation to do stuff. Dopamine plays a huge part in our daily lives, and in fact, your brain develops priorities in large part based on how much dopamine it's expecting to get. Dopamine correlates with our daily life activities. An activity that releases too little dopamine would result in you not having little or no motivation to carry it out. But on the other hand, any fun activities would release a lot of dopamine, and you would be motivated to repeat it over and over again. So, which activity is able to induce high dopamine activity, you might ask? The answer is one where you will anticipate a potential reward. However, if you know that there's no immediate rewards with the behavior, your brain won't release any dopamine. For example, before you eat your favorite food, your brain will release dopamine because you anticipated that it will make you feel good. Even so, if the high dopamine activity is damaging to you, it just means that your brain wants more of it. A stereotypical example would be someone who's a drug addict. He is well aware that what he's doing is not good for him, but all he wants is just more of that drug since it will release an unnatural amount of dopamine, which in turn makes him crave them even more. That is typically how addiction comes about. It is undeniable that nearly everything causes our brain to release some amount of dopamine. Even drinking water when you're thirsty does, but the highest dopamine release would be when you get a reward. Let's take gambling as an example. People continue to gamble even though they are losing a lot of money because they expect that they will get a bigger reward if they continue to do so, but they just don't know when it might happen. Even so, in today's digital society, we are flooding and drenching our brains with unnaturally high levels of dopamine on a daily basis, but we are just unaware of it. For example, scrolling through your social media, playing video games, or even watching pornography could release high levels of dopamine. This is because we anticipate a certain reward with those behaviors. That's why we constantly check our phones while studying or eating, because we expect to see a text message or a notification of some sort. You might think that overflooding your brain with abnormal levels of dopamine is harmless, but you are wrong. Our bodies have a biological system called homeostasis. It is basically a system in our body to keep its internal, physical, and chemical conditions at a stable equilibrium. Whenever an imbalance occurs, our body restores it through a few processes. Allow me to give you an example. When it's cold outside and our body temperature falls, we start to shiver, so that heat can be generated to help keep our body warm. Essentially, our body somehow finds ways to adapt in these rough conditions. However, there's another way homeostasis manifests itself, which is through tolerance. As an illustration, someone who rarely drinks alcohol will get drunk faster as compared to someone who drinks on a regular basis. The person would need to drink more alcohol to get drunk as his body has developed a tolerance to it. In other words, his body is less sensitive to the effects of alcohol. The same concept applies to psychotic drugs. It's not that different with dopamine. Your body tries to maintain homeostasis. As a result, it will down-regulate your dopamine receptors. Essentially, your brain gets used to having high levels of dopamine, and those levels become your new normal, thus you develop a dopamine tolerance. This would be a big problem because activities that don't give you as much dopamine would be no longer interest to you, and thus it's more difficult to motivate yourself to do it. This is also one of the reasons why some drug addicts would try to quit. Their dopamine tolerance gets so high that normal life wouldn't be able to match it. It is not only drug addicts, but people who are addicted to video games, social media, or watching pornography too experience the same thing. If you can relate to these experiences, then you might wonder how one can prevent this. The answer is you would need to perform a dopamine detox by now. What you're going to do is set aside a day where you're going to avoid all the highly stimulating activities. You're going to stop flooding your brain with high amounts of dopamine, and you're going to let your dopamine receptors recover. You must try to have as little fun as possible and won't be allowed to use any internet or technology. It might sound too extreme, but you should try not to listen to music, masturbate, or eat any junk food. Basically, you are going to remove all sources of external pleasure and you're going to embrace the boredom. You are, however, allowed to go for a walk, meditate, and just be alone with your thoughts while reflecting on your life and goals. Now you might be asking yourself, why would this even work? You can think of it this way. Let's say you always eat your meals from the best restaurants in town, that it became your normal. But suddenly one day someone offers you a bowl of porridge. You would probably refuse it because it just doesn't taste as good as your usual fancy meal. However, if one day you became broke and couldn't afford your usual fancy meals, suddenly the bowl of porridge doesn't seem so bad because it is better than going hungry. And that is how dopamine detox works. The process will starve you of all the pleasure that you usually get. After some time, those less entertaining activities will suddenly be more desirable because you're bored. The boring stuff becomes more fun now. On top of that, they will also become easier for you to them. Of course, avoiding high dopamine behavior once in a while is good, but ideally, you should connect more dopamine to things that will actually benefit you. And what I found is that your current high dopamine activities can serve as incentive to pursue things that actually give you those long-term benefits. In other words, you could use your high dopamine activity as a reward for completing difficult work, and this is exactly what I do myself. For example, I always do the hard tasks first, like cleaning my room, doing the dishes, laundry, studying for an hour or two, and exercising. After getting those things done, I will usually reward myself with some amount of high dopamine activity. For me, those would be just watching a new episode of my favorite show on Netflix, or just 30 minutes on social media. If you like, you could reward yourself with 15 minutes of high dopamine activity after 1 hour of low dopamine activity. If you're addicted to something that's damaging to your health, then you don't want to treat that behavior as a reward itself. Find a different reward. If you're wondering what my guilty pleasure is, it's the internet. I tend to easily lose track of time when I'm on the internet. That is why I have this system. Even with this system, I still abstain from high dopamine activities on some days, but this is just me. To conclude this video, I would like to say that it is possible to make doing difficult things feel easier. If you have motivation problems, I would highly suggest that you start to spend less time on your phone and computer along with other high dopamine activities. Expose yourself to it less frequently, and I can guarantee that you will feel a bit more excited to do normal everyday low dopamine activities again. We are all dopamine addicts to a certain extent, and that's a good thing because dopamine motivates us to achieve our goals and improve ourselves. However, it's entirely up to you to decide where you're going to get your dopamine from. Are you going to get it from things that don't benefit you, or are you going to get it from working on your long-term goals? Switch your source of dopamine and you instantly improve the quality of your life. If you learned something new from this video, please click on the like button so YouTube's algorithm will work its magic to let more people watch this video. If you already clicked on that like button, please also consider subscribing to the channel. Your support will help us continue to produce more great videos like this. Remember to click on the notification bell so you don't miss our new video.